The house smelled like roasted chicken, vanilla cake, and the faint scent of perfume from the women who had spent hours getting ready for Dad's party. The laughter of family echoed from every corner, voices overlapping, glasses clinking, and the low hum of music filling the background. Mohammed stood near the kitchen counter, holding a glass of water, trying to force a smile he didn't feel. He had arrived with good intentions, thinking this party could smooth over the rough edges of family tension. But he hadn't counted on betrayal hiding behind familiar faces. He had spent weeks preparing for tonight. New shirt, careful grooming, a calm demeanor. He wanted to fit in, to be seen as part of the family, to belong. And yet, as he watched from across the room, his nephew Ryan leaned toward his friend, smirking like he owned the space. Ryan was 17, tall for his age, full of confidence and arrogance that made him seem older than he was. Mohammed had always tolerated the boy's attitude, even laughed it off when Ryan teased him. But tonight was different. Mohammed caught the words before he could even turn away. Why is he even here? It's not family. The phrase hit him like a punch to the chest, so sudden, so brutal, that for a moment he couldn't breathe. His grip tightened on the glass, knuckles white, and he felt a rush of heat rise in his chest. Not family. Just 3 words, but they cut deeper than any argument, deeper than years of grudges or misunderstandings. The room seemed to shrink, the laughter fading to a dull murmur in Mohammed's ears. He looked around, hoping someone would intervene, hoping Dad or one of the adults would stop the boy from speaking like that. But no one did. No one even noticed. They were too busy laughing at another joke, oblivious to the word that had branded him an outsider. Mohammed wanted to shout, to defend himself, to demand respect, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he turned and walked toward the balcony, needing space, needing air. The night outside was cool, the wind brushing against his face, sharp and cleansing, but it did little to calm the storm inside him. He leaned against the railing, staring at the darkened garden below, the moonlight casting pale silver over the grass. He replayed the scene over and over in his mind. The smirk, the words, the ease with which Ryan had dismissed him. Not family. He felt a mixture of shock, hurt, and anger so intense it made his chest tighten. Mohammed's mind was racing. Memories of past gatherings, birthdays, holidays, all the times he had laughed, helped, and stood by his family, clashed violently with the harsh dismissal from a teenager who thought he could wield cruelty as easily as he wore his smug grin. He thought about the times Ryan had teased him, small jabs that Mohammed had ignored, thinking they were harmless. But tonight, those small cuts felt like evidence of a bigger betrayal. He remembered the first time he had met Ryan as a child, a shy boy with bright eyes and endless curiosity. Back then, he had wanted to nurture him, to guide him, to be a part of his growth. Mohammed had been patient, supportive, even protective. And now all that effort, all that care was reduced to a single dismissive phrase. Not family. He felt the first flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Anger, sharp and focused. It wasn't a blind, reckless rage. It was cold, calculating, and it demanded action. Mohammed wanted to leave, to disappear from the house that had suddenly become a place of humiliation. But he couldn't. Not yet. He had to process this, to understand it, to decide what it meant for the relationship, for the family, for himself. He poured himself another glass of water, letting it sit untouched on the balcony railing, watching the moonlight glint off the surface. He felt his heartbeat in his temples, in his ears, a constant drum that reminded him of the injustice he had just experienced. Not family. He repeated it in his mind, tasting the bitterness of each word. It was unfair. It was cruel. And it was. Personal Mohammed's thoughts drifted to Dad. He thought about how his father had always tried to keep the family together. How he had worked to provide, to mediate, to create an environment where everyone felt included. And yet here was Ryan, his own grandson, showing a level of disrespect that felt impossible to ignore. Mohammed wondered if Dad had heard the comment, if he had chosen to overlook it. or if he simply didn't realize the damage it had caused. The night stretched on, the party continuing inside, unaware of the emotional storm on the balcony. Muhammad considered confronting Ryan, but he knew it would accomplish nothing. The boy was too young to understand the weight of his words, too proud to admit wrongdoing, too confident to fear consequences. And yet, Muhammad couldn't shake the idea that consequences were necessary, some measure of balance, some way to ensure that cruelty didn't go unchallenged. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Muhammad lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining scenarios, conversations, ways to respond. He replayed Ryan's words, turning them over like a puzzle, searching for a flaw, a justification, a sign of weakness. His anger simmered, and with it came clarity. He wasn't going to let this slide, not quietly, not without impact. The word revenge hovered at the edges of his mind, not yet fully formed but present. Insistent by morning, Muhammad felt different. The hurt had hardened into resolve. The memory of Ryan's smirk, the ease with which he had dismissed Muhammad, fueled a determination that was as quiet as it was fierce. He was no longer simply the man who had been insulted. He was someone considering action, someone capable of consequences. And he knew deep down that whatever he chose next, it had to send a message. Not just to Ryan, but to everyone who had underestimated him. He stepped outside, coffee in hand, feeling the chill of the morning air. The party's aftermath was quiet now, the house still, the laughter and clinking glasses replaced by an eerie calm. And then, as he walked past the study where Dad kept important papers and accounts, Muhammad noticed something strange. A sense of unease prickled at the back of his neck. Something wasn't right. He opened the drawer that held Ryan's college fund paperwork. The folder was empty, heart skipping. Muhammad checked again. Still empty. Confusion, disbelief, and a cold surge of realization hit him all at once. The money, $482,000, was gone. The fund that Ryan had relied on for his future had vanished overnight. There were no signs of forced entry, no alarm triggers, nothing to suggest theft except the empty folder and the abrupt absence of what had been carefully saved. Muhammad's mind raced, connecting dots, piecing together possibilities. He could almost hear the words from last night echoing in his mind. Not family. They rang louder now, as if mocking the situation. The betrayal and the sudden disappearance of the fund became intertwined, forming a knot of anger, shock, and a sense of inevitability. He realized that the events of the night had set something in motion, and that his next steps would not be casual or easy in that moment. Muhammad understood something crucial. He could feel powerless, or he could act. The choice was his, and the path he would take would change everything. And in the quiet of the early morning, the sun rising over the garden and the house still asleep, Muhammad made the first silent decision that would lead him down the road of reckoning, a road fueled by betrayal, anger, and the undeniable drive for justice. Muhammad sat in his study, the morning sunlight cutting through the blinds in sharp lines across the floor. The house was quiet, everyone else still asleep or nursing hangovers from last night's party. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stared at the empty folder that had once held Ryan's college fund paperwork. $482,000 vanished. The number echoed in his mind, heavy and impossible to ignore. It wasn't just money, it was power, security, a future. And Ryan, who had mocked him without consequence, had taken it for granted. The first rush of anger had faded into a calm, chilling clarity. Muhammad didn't yell. He didn't panic. Began to think like someone who planned, someone who executed, someone who made sure that consequences landed exactly where they were deserved. He pulled out his laptop, logging into his accounts, cross-referencing details, retracing steps. Every document, every email, every digital footprint of Ryan's finances became a map. Muhammad didn't need luck. He needed precision. He remembered Ryan's words from the party, not family. They had been careless, arrogant, careless in their cruelty. Mohammed ran the words over in his mind repeatedly, testing their weight, imagining how much they stung in his own chest. He felt the faint pulse of satisfaction at the thought of making Ryan understand the consequences of dismissing him so casually. But it was mixed with unease. Could he really cross this line? Could he really take action that would change the boy's life? Mohammed leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. He replayed Ryan's entire personality in his mind. The confidence, the smugness, the sense of invincibility. He thought about how the boy laughed at his own jokes, ignored advice, and treated everyone like pawns. And he realized that just words wouldn't be enough this time. Words were fragile. The lesson had to be undeniable, had to be permanent. He started small, checking accounts, reviewing transactions, looking for weaknesses, oversights, mistakes. Ryan had been careless in his digital life, storing passwords in plain text, using weak security, leaving trails that could be followed. Mohammed traced connections, linked social media to banks, credit cards to emails, and noticed patterns no one else had bothered to see. He felt a quiet thrill at the realization. This wasn't chaos. It was control. Every evening, Mohammed would sit in the study long after the house was asleep, going through Ryan's habits, observing the teen's routines online and offline. He knew when Ryan woke up, when he logged into his accounts, when he went to basketball practice, even which friends he confided in. It was a careful collection of details, invisible to anyone else, but crystal clear to Mohammed. He was methodical, relentless, thinking not just about the theft of the fund, but about how it would affect Ryan's entire world. And yet, Mohammed wrestled with his conscience. Every time he imagined completing the plan, every time he imagined the shock on Ryan's face, he felt a flicker of doubt. Is this too much? He asked himself. Is this revenge or cruelty? He paced his study, the morning sunlight now dimming, and weighed morality against satisfaction. He knew that action had consequences, that taking the fund could permanently alter Ryan's future. But the memory of not family burned like a brand on his mind. The anger was justified, or at least, that's what he told himself. Mohammed started running simulations in his mind. If he moved the funds quietly, no alarms triggered, no questions asked, it would be clean. Ryan would wake up and find his future evaporated. Panic would set in, fear, humiliation, perhaps finally some respect. But Mohammed also imagined confronting the boy directly, standing over him, showing him the empty account, watching the arrogance dissolve into shock. That idea made him smile, a slow, almost predatory smile. He realized that the indirect approach would be stronger. Let the lesson land like a cold, quiet wind, unnoticed until it hit. The days blended together. Mohammed observed, calculated, plotted. He didn't sleep well, didn't eat much, didn't speak to anyone beyond necessary words. His focus narrowed to a single point, making Ryan understand that dismissing him so casually had consequences. He watched the boy at the kitchen table, laughing over cereal, scrolling on his phone, so sure of himself, so careless. And Mohammed knew that in just a short time, that confidence would shatter. He tested security systems, checked digital trails, ensured that no one would be able to trace the actions back to him. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about perfection. Mohammed wanted it precise, clean, undeniable. He imagined the family discovering it, the questions asked, the confusion, and felt satisfaction ripple through him, tempered by the quiet unease of what he was about to do. The weight of responsibility pressed on him, heavy but strangely liberating. Mohammed spent nights rehearsing conversations in his mind. If anyone asked, he would be calm, distant, innocent. He imagined Ryan's confrontation, the boy's disbelief turning into frantic explanations, promises, tears, excuses. Mohammed felt a shiver of anticipation. He didn't want cruelty for its own sake. He wanted a lesson. He wanted the arrogance stripped away, the smirk gone, replaced with understanding. He wanted Ryan to realize the cost of words, the weight of dismissal, and the true meaning of respect. Yet, even as he planned, Mohammed felt the pull of restraint. He knew that revenge carried a cost, that taking action would leave marks on him, not just on Ryan. He thought about his own father, about family loyalty, about the man who had always tried to keep the family together. Do you imagine the disappointment? If his father ever knew the moral compromise he was about to make? But Muhammad also remembered the betrayal, the cutting words, the casual dismissal of years of care and involvement. The memory of that moment fueled him, sharpened his focus. Pushed aside hesitation, Muhammad realized that planning the revenge was itself a kind of power. It consumed him, controlled him, sharpened his mind. He moved through his days with precision, interacting with the family normally, hiding the storm of calculation brewing beneath. No one suspected the quiet intensity of his mind, the careful plotting of consequences that would land without warning. He felt invisible, like a shadow moving through the house, watching, waiting. Finally, Muhammad's plan began to take shape. In detail, he knew the exact time to act, the exact method to ensure success, its precise chain of events that would lead to Ryan's discovery of the vanished fund. He visualized it down to the smallest moment, the look on Ryan's face, the shaking hands, the panic, the realization. Every detail, every reaction, every ripple accounted for. The revenge would be complete, and yet it would leave no trace of the orchestrator. Muhammad would remain unseen, untouchable. The force behind the lesson without ever stepping into the light. He paused one evening, staring out the window at the quiet street, and felt a strange mixture of anticipation and unease. The act would come soon, the moment of truth approaching like a wave. Ahmed felt the tension in his chest, a tight coil of adrenaline and focus. The plan was ready, but the emotional weight of what he was about to do pressed heavily on him. He could feel the moral line trembling, the edge between justified revenge and cruelty. Razor-thin. Muhammad sat back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He felt ready. The betrayal had ignited a fire within him that no calm reasoning could extinguish. And as the night deepened and the house slept, he realized the path forward was clear. The money would vanish. The lesson would land. Ryan would understand. And Mohammed would finally reclaim a sense of control, of respect, of justice in a family. That had allowed words to wound without consequence. The storm inside him had settled into cold determination. He would not be careless. He would not falter. The time for planning was almost over. The time for action was near. And as he closed his laptop and prepared for the final steps, Muhammad knew that nothing would ever be the same again, not for Ryan, not for the family, and not for himself. The night was heavy with anticipation. Muhammad sat at his desk, staring at the screen that would make everything real. Every calculation, every observation, every plan he had spent days and nights perfecting had led to this exact moment. The house was quiet, the hum of the city outside, distant and dull compared to the storm inside him. He could feel his pulse in his temples, steady but electric. A reminder that the moment of decision was finally here. He reviewed every detail once more. The bank transfers, the security loopholes, the digital footprints Ryan had left carelessly. Mohammed had left nothing to chance. The fund was ready to vanish, the pathway complete, and the lesson about to land with precision. He imagined Ryan waking up tomorrow, confident, smug, unaware that his world was about to collapse. Mohammed could see the boy's face, the disbelief, the panic, the desperate scramble to make sense of the impossible. But as his finger hovered over the final button, Muhammad paused. A flicker of doubt ran through him, sharp and sudden. He thought about the boy, his nephew, still a teenager, full of arrogance but also naive, impressionable, capable of growth if guided instead of crushed. The weight of what he was about. Too pressed down like a stone on his chest. Revenge had always been a fantasy in his mind, precise and justified. But in reality, the act would be irreversible, permanent. and it could reshape lives in ways he hadn't fully considered. Muhammad closed his eyes, recalling Ryan's words from the party. Not family. They had cut deep, yes, but were they worth destroying someone's future over? The anger that had fueled him for days collided with a sudden clarity. Revenge could be satisfying, but it could also leave a hollow ache, a void that no victory could fill. Yet the memory of humiliation lingered, stubborn and unforgiving. Not family. The words demanded response. He opened his eyes and leaned back, fingers brushing the keyboard lightly, feeling the tension in every muscle. He weighed the consequences. If he executed the plan, Ryan would be forced to confront his arrogance, the careless cruelty, the assumptions of privilege. Mohammed imagined the boy calling his parents, his father's panic, his mother's disbelief, the chaos, the emotional shock, the lesson. It all seemed so clear, so complete. Yet alongside that, he felt a flicker of unease. Was this justice or merely payback? Could he live with the knowledge that he had caused fear and panic in a child? However arrogant, time seemed to stretch. The city outside was dark, indifferent to the drama unfolding in a small study. Muhammad thought about his father, about the man who had worked to keep the family together, about the ideals of loyalty and protection he had been raised to honor. He imagined Dad discovering the missing fund and the ripple of disappointment, betrayal, and confusion that would follow. Muhammad realized the moral weight of his actions pressed not only on Ryan, but on the fabric of family itself. Yet, even as doubt gnawed, Muhammad felt the steady burn of resolve returning. He had been wrong-knocked, dismissed, reduced to an outsider by words that should have never been spoken. And Ryan, careless and arrogant, had to understand that actions and words carried consequences. Muhammad leaned forward, focusing entirely on the task. The hesitation that had surfaced moments before was replaced by cold, controlled determination. This was not cruelty for its own sake, was precision, a calculated lesson, a demand for accountability. He clicked a few keys, reviewing the transfer one last time. Every detail was correct, every loophole accounted for, every safeguard in place. Muhammad imagined Ryan opening his laptop, expecting routine, only to find the fund missing. He pictured the disbelief, the panic, the frantic calls. The realization that the arrogance that had allowed him to dismiss Muhammad had blinded him to consequences. The image made Muhammad's chest tighten, a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease settling in his gut. The screen stared back at him, blank yet filled with possibility. The final click would set everything in motion. Muhammad felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, sharp and precise, reminding him that he was in control. The storm of days passed, the betrayal, the anger, the planning culminated in this singular point. He realized that power and responsibility were inseparable. One misstep could undo everything. But perfection would deliver the lesson with surgical precision. Muhammad's finger trembled slightly over the mouse. He imagined Ryan discovering the missing fund at breakfast. The initial confusion, the frantic search through accounts, the desperate calls. Muhammad allowed himself a small, tight smile. The boy's arrogance, his dismissive words, his careless disregard for those who had supported him at all deserved reckoning. Yet Muhammad also reminded himself that the act must remain clean, invisible, undeniable. The lesson would land, but the hand behind it would remain unseen. He leaned back, taking a deep breath. The anticipation stretched, the room silent except for the faint hum of the laptop. Muhammad thought about the long-term consequences, not just for Ryan, but for the family, for himself. He knew that revenge, even perfectly executed, was a double-edged sword. Satisfaction would come, yes, but it would be tinged with the knowledge of what he had done. The act would change him, harden him, make him capable of things he had never considered before. Muhammad's eyes narrowed. The plan had been forged in anger, shaped by betrayal, refined by calculation. There was no going back. He had wrestled with morality, weighed consequences, examined every angle, and still the choice remained his. The final click was a commitment, a point of no return, a defining moment of action. The fund would vanish and Ryan would learn a lesson he could not ignore. His finger moved slowly, deliberately, over the mouse. Muhammad felt a surge of clarity. He wasn't acting out of blind rage, was acting with intention, with precision, with the knowledge that consequences must match actions. He clicked, the transfer completed. The numbers on the screen confirmed it. The fund was gone. Muhammad sat back, heart pounding, a mixture of satisfaction and strange emptiness washing over him. He had delivered the lesson. He had enacted revenge. And yet, even in the triumph, he felt the weight of the act pressed down. A reminder that power and morality were never entirely separate. By morning, the house was awake. Ryan discovered the empty account, his disbelief instantly turning to panic. Calls were made, voices raised, accusations flung. Muhammad watched from a distance, hidden in plain sight, observing the chaos unfold. The boy's arrogance had dissolved into confusion and fear, the smugness replaced by urgent desperation. Muhammad felt a grim satisfaction, tempered by the subtle knowledge that lessons learned through fear could leave scars, both visible and invisible. Muhammad reflected as he observed the aftermath. The lesson had landed, but so had a change within. Himself, he realized that revenge satisfied the mind but left echoes in the heart, subtle and enduring. The act had proven consequences were real, that disrespect and dismissal could not go unchallenged. Yet it also reminded him of the fragility of morality, the ease with which one could slip from justice into cruelty. The house slowly returned to normal, the family buzzing with questions and confusion, none suspecting the quiet architect of the lesson. Muhammad felt a strange peace, a mixture of power, control, and an awareness of the line he had crossed. He knew that nothing would ever be the same, not Ryan, not the family, not himself. And as he sat quietly, sipping coffee, he understood the final truth of revenge. It was never about satisfaction alone. It was about understanding the weight of actions, the consequences of words, and the delicate balance between justice and destruction. Muhammad leaned back, watching the sunlight spill across the study floor. He had acted, he had delivered, he had claimed his moment of justice. And yet, deep down, he knew the lesson was not just for Ryan. It was for himself, a reminder that power, when wielded with clarity and precision, could shape the world, but it also left a mark on the one who dared to use it. Revenge had come full circle, delivering satisfaction, fear, and reflection, leaving a path that would be remembered and consequences that would echo far beyond the moment.